Hi, I'm Bill Lampton, and it's my privilege to welcome as my guest today, and your guest, Phil Schaefer. Phil is one of the best-known voices in sports, and in fact has just written a book about his career and his life, Sins of a Southern Sportscaster. We're going to be talking about the book and also about Phil's life in and out of sports. Phil, it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you today, and I remember when you and I first got acquainted back in 1972 at the Atlanta Golf Classic. You were broadcasting the tournament for WSB, and I had the privilege of working with you.
Yeah, that's where we met, and of course you're a great golf fan, and I know you've been to the Masters many times, and I've been fortunate to cover the Masters for over 4 decades.
43 times you've been there.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask now, why have you turned to print? You've been known as a non-print media specialist. Why the book?
Well, I've had an interesting career, and I've been very fortunate. When I was young, I did Ohio State basketball. I did that for 5 years, and then I moved to Atlanta with WSB. And when WSB got the rights to the Hawks, I ended up doing their play-by-play for 5 years. And then when WSB lost the right to the Hawks, I ended up a couple years later doing Georgia basketball, and I did that for almost 2 decades. And then after I'd done Georgia basketball for a year, they asked me to move over and also help out on the football games, and I became Larry Munson's partner for 16 years. And so I was fortunate to do a lot of things, and I thought after my career was starting to wind down a little bit, and I was starting to have grandchildren, I thought, I don't know if my children and especially my grandchildren are going to have any idea about anything I ever did. Maybe they'll only hear, that your granddad was on the radio or on television some. And I thought, there's no way I can tell them all the things that I did. So maybe someday they'll appreciate looking at this when I'm long gone and saying, gosh, this is interesting, and now I know more about my granddad.
So this is one of the reasons that you wrote Sins of a Southern Sportscaster.
That's what prompted me to write it.
Phil, one of the things that happens with those of us who follow sports, listening to sports broadcasts, reading about sports figures, we get so much in the way of bad news about athletes, both college athletes and professional athletes. As I read your book, and particularly when I got to the section talking about how much you have done in the way of raising funds for Huntington's disease, I read over and over about people who have given their time, their talents, used their influence and their reputation. Looking, for example, at the back of the book, you have, at the start, we have the intro the foreword by Dale Murphy, and then on the back, comments by Phil Niekro, Jeff Blauser, Fran Tarkenton, Kevin Butler, Jack Nicklaus. There are some good people in sports. Tell us, who are some that you've been involved with, please?
Well, the ones that you just mentioned are all just tremendous people. They have been so instrumental in helping me in the fight against Ph.D. Jack Nicklaus was a classmate of mine at Ohio State, and I consider Jack one of the classiest athletes that I ever met in my broadcasting career. And of course I'm prejudiced because I'm also a Buckeye, and we went to school together. But and Dale Murphy, what a wonderful person. I mean, Dale is just so positive, and he is one of the finest people I've ever met in my life. And then Jeff Blauser. Phil Niekro always would come forward and help me out whenever I asked for it. Phil grew up in Ohio, and it's kind of funny. I met him actually when I was at Ohio State. John Havlicek, a friend of mine, grew up with Phil, and he introduced me. And then I had I just never thought that I would meet him again in my life, and here I am in Atlanta years later, and here he is coming up as a rookie pitcher. And then Of course, years later, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Now, also, as I read through the book, as I hope many other people will do, I come across your dealings with some of the most colorful characters in sports. I think our viewers and listeners would like to hear about what Woody Hayes did at the halftime with his team against Purdue. Very different from what other coaches do.
Well, I'm a student at Ohio State, and I'm in the press box, and so I'm sitting up high in the big horseshoe there in Columbus, and it's halftime, and Ohio State is tied with Purdue. And then when the two teams went to their locker rooms, they crisscrossed. One went to the locker room in this corner and one went to this corner. Well, the two teams crisscrossed, but Ohio State didn't go into the locker room. They ran right out of the stadium. The football team just runs out of the stadium. I thought, where in the world are they going? Are they going up to the corner to get something to eat at halftime? No, they were going out to the practice field. And you could see the practice field from the press box. And they went out on the practice field and they ran this same off-tackle play over and over and over again the entire halftime.
Until they got it right.
Until they got it right, and until the halftime ended, and they had to go back out onto the field to play the second half. I felt sorry for some of the guys that didn't have a chance to go to the bathroom at halftime.
Not even that. Not even that. Again, as I read the book, I found many wonderful, interesting stories in there. All of us would like to know, you have seen many great athletes, professional and amateur. Who would you select, and I won't say one, who would be the top 1, 2, or 3 athletes that you watched in all of your sports?
Herschel Walker really stands out. I still consider him the greatest college athlete that I ever saw. Because some people say, well, Herschel maybe didn't have the moves to go this way or that way. But I'll tell you what, Herschel was the greatest college running back ever. He picked up a Georgia football team, carried him on his shoulders to a national championship.
1980.
Right. And I mean, I just think that Herschel Walker is maybe the greatest college football player ever. I was fortunate to do every game that Dominique Wilkins ever played in college. What a brilliant athlete he was. I love watching John Havlicek play at Ohio State. Havlicek was great. And of course, I always think of Jack Nicklaus as being the greatest golfer.
Phil, you have made many, many contributions to sports. This is another one. Tell us, please, how we can get the book.
Well, you can go to my email address is the easiest way to order it, and that's sesportsb at comcast.net.
And notice that's at the bottom of the screen. We'll put it at the bottom of the screen where they can see it.
All right. And then if you want to see something about the book, you can go to the website, which is southernsportscaster.com. Just go to southernsportscaster.com, and you can read a little bit on there about the book. It has some of the comments from the different athletes.
Very good. And you'll be doing some book signings?
Yes, I have some book signings coming up.
Any closing comments about the book, what you hope its purpose is, what it achieves, in addition to having your children and grandchildren recognize what your career was all about?
Well, I've got one little story if we have time. And when I was at Ohio State, we had a professor there by the name of Larry Lichty, and he went on to Wisconsin. And I was up in Wisconsin years later, and I had dinner with him after I had done a Hawks game. The Hawks were playing in Madison against the Milwaukee Bucks. And Larry says, I always tell my students that are in broadcasting that you probably won't end up doing what you think you're going to do. He said, and I tell my students that it just doesn't happen. He says, except there was one guy I had at Ohio State that just swore he was going to be a sportscaster, and he says his name was Phil Schaefer, and he says, I tell that. So what I try to get people to understand in this book is, especially young people, if you want to do something, it's something you really want to do, you can do it. Now, it's going to take work, and you're going to have sometimes you're going to have blinders on because you want to go forward and you want to do this. But if you work hard at something, you will make it, and you'll be able to do what you want to. But you've got to work at it. So that's kind of a hidden message that I have in there.
It comes across clearly. And again, I encourage everybody to order this book. You'll enjoy it as I have. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Bill.